Adam, thank you for being on our show, and I'm looking forward to our chat today because it appears that you are the Elon Musk of motorcycles.
I absolutely no way could put myself in that category, but let's talk about the electric motorcycles.
Okay, before we do that, I'd quickly like to just talk a little bit about you from what I've read. You know, you were born into the world of advertising with your father, and so he was kind of harnessing your creativity from a young age. And your first business venture was at the age of 16, where you were running boat cruises along the River Thames in London. And at the age of 19, you set up a business which helped other businesses set up. And at the age of 23, you started a career in television, where you were, helping productions for the BBC, Channel 4, Tiger Aspect, Optimum, Endemol, and Ricochet. And then after that, you've started presenting your own TV series and radio shows, and then you moved to Dubai in 2008.
Correct.
So before I continue reading, can you tell me about why you moved to Dubai in 2008?
Yes, it's actually the best thing that's ever happened, but it was a slightly morbid story which I haven't told you about, so I don't know whether you want to include this. But my uncle used to live here, and he was here for about 3 years, and he came over to London on holiday, and he said, Adam, you've got to move to Dubai. You've got to be there. This city is just made for you. Personality, opportunities, like you've absolutely got to give Dubai a go. So I said, all right, I'll do it. And I was quite happy in London, working in TV, doing my own thing. And I said to him, like, how much do I need to bring out? How much do I need to set up? So he gave me a figure. I thought, right, I'm gonna go for it. So it took me about 6-8 months. And a period of time into that, I received a phone call, which wasn't the nicest of phone calls, and he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was terminal. So my parents, who were living in France at the time, locked the door behind them within 4 days and just flew out to Dubai to look after him and just be there supporting. And I sort of cut my bit short as well to come and be that support person, so far from martyrdom, of course, but there was just, what can I do to be there? And I was coming out here anyway, and I just made sure that I was here. So as the family were going through that journey of their life, I was coming to start my journey in Dubai and the UAE. So it was a harrowing time emotionally, but when I arrived here, I could just see the opportunities, and I knew that I wanted and needed to make this work. So after everything happened with the family, I'd set up a little bit of a base here. And the best advice actually that someone gave me was never turn down a social invitation. Always have business cards on you. And in 2008, there were no jobs, there was nothing. I had absolutely nothing when I came out here apart from a few dirhams in my pocket. And it was just that networking and building those foundations. I suppose that's kept me here, but that was the catalyst for me arriving in Dubai.
Well, firstly, sorry to hear about your uncle, and that's quite a story. It makes you, in a way, look away and reflect a little bit, isn't it? I think your story is also interesting because, the typical expat comes to Dubai with a nice job opportunity, and that's how they typically start out. But you literally just came out here with opportunity in mind and probably entrepreneurship in mind. So
yes.
Did that not kind of scare you a little bit?
I've always been a risk taker from quite a young age. I'm an all-in type of guy. And one of the things when I was actually offered a job by a company while I was in the UK, and I arrived here and it was on a Thursday, and I remember it vividly. So I arrived here, had the weekend to settle in, I had an offer letter. On the Sunday morning I phoned up the company and said, hi, it's Adam, I don't know where to go, haven't heard from anyone, I followed up last week, I'm here. And I'd shipped everything. By sea, I'd shipped everything to the UAE, it's already arrived. It was to turn up to my apartment a few days later. And they said, yeah, there's a freeze on recruitment. So what is that? And I've never heard that term. So I said, well, what does that mean? Well, you haven't got a job, we'll be in touch. So I just didn't have a clue where to go, where to turn, what to do. But I knew the opportunities that were here because my uncle was the age bracket between my parents and myself. So he was very much like an older brother and very much a mentor. So when he says there's opportunity, someone close to you that you trust and admire, that's what there is in Dubai. So you've just got to go all out.
So then what you did is you set up a series of creative entities straight away?
Yes.
And these are called Media Cube?
I was looking for an opportunity. I was looking for work. I was going having lots of chats, which in TV, a chat is an interview, but over here was very different. A chat was just a chat. And I found that I was having loads of chats, meeting a lot of people, but there were just no jobs. There was nothing out here, but there was also no platform for the media industry to communicate, find jobs, find information, network, and there was just nothing. So Media Cubed initially started off as a trilogy of 3 dimensions: production, creative, and talent. And it was a platform designed to help the media industry communicate, whether you're looking for a DOP or an art director. And unfortunately, that company was a subscription-based business, and in 2009 it just wasn't working, no one was employing. So then I fractured Media Cubed into the 3 entities: production being video, so video production and content creation; ad brand is the creative part, and then dot casting is the talent side. So it still exists as a holding group, but fractured into 3 entities.
So really what you did was you kind of broke up the service into 3 different products. And was that all the change that was required to bring you to where you are today?
No, far from it. It'd be lovely if it was to some extent, but then I wouldn't have had the lessons along the way. So when I fractured the companies and set them up as individual entities, all of a sudden when I was meeting clients and prospects, people knew exactly what Media Cube did, because really as an entity it does everything. It's exactly what I was raised with. An advertising agency 50 years ago was the marketing, was the film production, was branding, the copywriting and so on. So what we were offering was exactly what it was, the initial definition of advertising. But it was such a big, the power of perception, I suppose. It was a much larger company than it actually was. But then when I fractured, it allowed Ad Brand to become a considered branding and creative agency. So we just focused on that. And then if a client wanted content, we could offer them content. If they wanted other services, we can offer those as well. So it was a more of a strategic move than I initiated or initially thought. But yeah, that was just one of the changes through the journey.
So now let's talk about ONE MOTO, and that's a complete shift in terms of the type of business that you're getting into. So can you tell us about the story of how you got into this, and what stage are you at, and what are your plans going forward?
Love to, thank you. So ONE MOTO, from its name, is from the branding point of view, so we can use the facilities that Ad Brand offers. So ONE MOTO is like on electric, and if you look at the logo, it's very much an obvious presentation of one using the power switch and so on. But where the actual idea came from was a business partner in the UK. We were having a conversation, and I wanted to do something different. And you can, from a branding point of view, you can create beautiful brands that hopefully will have a bit of legacy. Working with global brands, small brands, to build them and just give a little bit of individuality and evolution in design, which I love. It's what I get up for every day. Even when you're creating video content, you can be really creative, but there's a certain level of it doesn't matter. It's not changing the world. It's not contributing in a positive way, but it just makes it slightly prettier. And then we were talking, I wanted to do something different. And for about 7 years in Dubai, I was riding a Vespa. So the white Vespa that had all the lights and mirrors, that was me for a while. And then I had a larger bike, a Triumph, for a couple of years. So I've been riding for about 20 years. And I wanted to create something that had a sustainable legacy. And that's where the idea came about, from a conversation. So we started to draw out some ideas from a experienced rider's point of view. What do you need from a bike? And if it was to be electric, what would then you want to ride if you're a private commuter, if you like, but then also for the delivery market, because bikes create 16 times more hydrocarbons than SUVs. So below planes, per capita, motorcycles are the most harmful to the environment. And when you've got nearly 12,000, or reported 12,000 in the UAE or on the UAE roads, that's quite a staggering amount. And so we started to research and find out more and more and more about electric vehicles. And yes, I started following Elon Musk and what is he doing? Where's his mind?
But isn't it crazy that no one's actually thought about it? Or do you have similar players in other markets?
Yes, there are manufacturers. There's some incredibly beautifully designed, say, passenger motorcycles that are more on that superbike range. But when you start looking at the commuter, the everyday transport, there's no one that has produced a bike that has the power, the range, and just that focus, attention to the detail in the product is one thing. The affordability, we need to take the inconvenience away of owning an electric motorcycle, electric vehicle. Because if you look at cars, the investment's huge. A lot of that's down to the battery. But as the battery and the motor do reduce in price and the technology increases and making it more affordable, then yes, we are going to see that shift more so into electric vehicles.
Let's talk a little bit about your product. So it's essentially a typical motorbike with batteries in it, or is there anything more to it than that?
There's a little bit more to it than that, but in principle, the beautiful thing is with electric vehicles is there's not very many moving parts. So if there is ever an issue, things can be replaced quite easily. The most costly parts of the bike, other than the sort of the design, getting it through R&D approvals, testing, certification, there's that journey. But then once you've actually got the bike, it's the battery. And we make sure that from the delivery company or the fleet management company, the transportation logistics, so they're our primary clients, but what is it they want? So we worked very closely with a few of the larger companies. Just tell us, as we're in R&D, this is the perfect time. So tell us what it is you want. And we created the Biker, which is the delivery bike, which has an alarm system. Now, we don't really need alarm systems because of the beauty of safety that we have in the UAE, but in other parts of the world you do. There's a radio on board. There's a mobile app where you can choose the sound that you want your bike to make. So if you want a V8 engine, crack on, off you go. But then there's more of an intelligence behind it of what big data do you want. So working with telcos and the telematics companies, as well as us and the last mile logistics, we've just got the requirements of what information do you want. And we'll use this through our onboarding dashboard and so on to then collate and curate this content and the data to be able to give it back. But we're focused on really changing that last mile and food delivery industry.
I mean, talking about fleets, and of course we've seen the rise of e-commerce and the food delivery apps. Sure, I understand the opportunity in terms of, having an electric bike do the job as opposed to our conventional options available today. What really concerns me is the safety of the actual riders. I mean, when we were looking at the insurance requirements for ONE MOTO, and as we've done in the past with other fleets, it's clear that there is a very, very high level of accidents that happen. And out of personal experience, I mean, my grandfather had a fall a couple of years ago, and he was at the Rashid Hospital in the trauma department, and it was shocking to see that almost, I would say, 8 in every 10 of the patients there were a result of motorcycle accidents. And you said there's how many? 12,000 bikes on the road, as opposed to, I don't know, a couple of million cars. So there is a very kind of high risk associated with riding, which I don't think we understand on a day-to-day basis when we're using the convenience of these apps. So how do we deal with that problem when it comes to biker safety?
What a beautiful question. It's multifaceted in terms of the answer. I've met with Ride Safe UAE, so to find out where those pain points are of their experience. Then we start looking at the bikes themselves. Then we look at the operators, the fleet management companies. Then we look at the riders, look at their backgrounds, their education, their knowledge, their wisdom when it comes to what a bike is, like their vehicle that they're riding, but also how they ride. So when you start looking and piecing together all of these say verticals of how to create a safe riding community, a lot of it, I believe, comes down to education. So 20 years ago when I took my test, it was 3.5 days, which is nothing in consideration but to what's offered here, but 3.5 days, and it was an advanced riders course. And you are taught certain things like the lifesaver, which is the look over the shoulder. So don't rely on your mirrors. The road position is incredibly important. Indicate. It's my biggest bugbear, whether I'm driving or riding. Drivers just don't indicate here, and it drives me insane because I can see near accidents, whether it's car and car or car and bike. You know, we go through this every day. So there's a education much greater than just on riders. But if you take the riding arm of and the education of the riders, it then also comes to the riding schools and those that are training. So our bikes are twist and go, so you don't have the gears, there's less maintenance, well, there's no maintenance, there's no servicing, but it also is a slightly different riding style because you are twist and go. There's 3 power switches, so when you're in the sort of inner, say, suburbs or inner city even, you're going to use the lowest gear, which gives you 35 kilometers an hour because you don't need that pace. Helps the battery, but also you don't need that fast acceleration. And then you can go through gear 2 and gear 3 when you're on, say, one of the main highways. But if you take the rider safety into the training, the education, and then the riding schools, that will quash a lot of issues. But then you also need to look at the maintenance of the bikes. Now, it does vary slightly depending upon how many kilometers that rider does, but there's a big cost to the, say, fleet management companies or the end client of big food delivery companies, and they need to maintain and service those vehicles. Now, coming from a rider with just 20 years experience, it's enough to have some level of wisdom and also approach with confidence of when you look at the tyres and you can see that the rear tyres are most visible, they're almost square because they're not changed. The chains are baggy. It's dangerous. You can actually see sometimes the smoke coming out of those engines, which you usually see on a 2-stroke engine years ago, but seeing that on a 4-stroke engine, they're just not maintained at all well. So really, I do think that the answer comes across education across many levels, but when you start looking at the maintenance and servicing, it's a huge investment, massive cost on an annual basis. We're avoiding that. And when you then look at the riders, we need the riders to adopt ONE MOTO, the electric vehicles. Now, they may not care about the environment. They may care more about the environment than we realise. We're not sure. But when the riders have to pay their own fuel, their own SALIC, and they have that downtime, and then their wages, depending on how they're paid, the commissions and so on, per drop-off, you don't have that as a rider. So you're actually going to be earning more. So, and the bikes are designed with so much of a quality and safety purpose.
So just to be clear, there's obviously no fuel costs, but there's also no SALIC costs.
Absolutely, it's a government incentive, which is beautiful. And with any electric vehicle, there needs to be some incentive. I believe Norway offer the greatest incentive, and they have the highest uptake of electric vehicles globally. So the UAE is, I believe, the most charging stations per capita, closely followed by Egypt, or Egypt has that in plan. So really, when you start looking at the evolution of electric vehicles and the implementation, integration into our society, the vision is there. We're offering a solution to help just in that delivery sector. Just for now, let's just focus on that. We've got other visions and other plans, not just here but overseas.
So circling back to driver safety, and as you speak, I'd love to be able to actually work with the insurers to actually figure out what are the causes of these accidents. You've pointed out education and training could be a factor. The maintenance of the vehicle, so if there's a mechanical problem in the vehicle, that could cause accidents. And the last point was the incentives, the way riders are incentivized. And obviously that's a harder one to deal with because all of the companies are competing with each other for higher productivity and faster delivery times and all of that. But the incentives are a problem because that causes them to rush and probably make mistakes.
Very good point. There was a really lovely, it was an upsetting article to read, but it was from, I believe it was in the National recently, and it was about a rider who was telling his story and the sort of pain points and the journey that he's been on. And what resonated was the sort of take-home points were these riders, they started off on one salary and then it would change. And I'm not getting into how they get paid, but what seemed to happen, plus our own research, is then riders were being offered a pay per delivery. So they'd earn per delivery. Then if a customer was ever to cancel that order, that would affect the rider.
Wow.
It's the last person really to be affected, but you don't know what other situations are around that. So you can't really comment too much. But they are working 12, sometimes up to 16 hours a day, as it was reported in the article. Yes, there are quiet times, there are busy times, there, peak and off peak. We understand that. But then if you know that you have no fuel costs, which is going to save you a minimum from what we've calculated, between 7 and 14,000 dirhams a year just in fuel, then you don't have your salic. How many trips are you doing? So even if that was 1,000 dirhams a month.
And presumably for all of these riders, this money is saved by them as opposed to their companies.
Absolutely, yeah. And then obviously working with you guys, being able to offer free insurance, it takes away the inconvenience to some extent, but it also gives that extra reward and that extra reason.
So all of these things are actually benefiting riders.
They're benefiting the riders, but also we need to be benefiting the companies. So no one wants to pay for anything. So what can we do in order to make people feel like they're saving? Well, they are actually saving as much.
But just for clarity, for a company, let's say Uber Eats or, somebody along those lines, what's the difference between, what they're paying for a conventional, bike and for a ONE MOTO product?
Okay, so some of the food last mile, first mile delivery companies, very few of them actually own their own fleet of bikes. So they work with fleet management companies, transport companies, and contract the riders and the bikes. So the premise is that the transport companies, fleet operators, they have the cost of maintenance, servicing, insurance. The riders are just supplied by that, which affects the brands, because a rider that's working for company A can also work for company B and C. So you don't have that brand, even if you train them about the brand integrity, how you should present yourself, and everything that the brands have spent millions and millions of hours on top of the financial side to train and embed that into what we would see as the end user receiving our plate of food at delivery. They can work for anyone. So the cost for the fleet management companies are fairly high because you've got the service and the maintenance. If they fail to do that or choose not to do that 1 month, it puts the riders at risk, and it puts the delivery companies aren't going to know about this. There's so many sort of niggly elements to the industry that we just want to offer one solution that saves everyone money. You don't then have the oil changes. You don't have all the spare parts that need to be changed. You reduce that cost. You reduce the downtime. So when you look at a food delivery company and the driver's getting paid per delivery, or you've got some companies that are offering incredible, within 20 minutes, within 30 minutes we'll deliver. Well, we can guarantee that because that bike won't break down. That bike doesn't need to stop off for fuel while it's going, on its journey. So, and then you've got the downtime of the rider having to service the bike every few.
Have you tried to run, I know this is kind of subjective, but have you tried to run a calculation of what somebody is actually looking to save as a result of this? Because there's obviously the upfront, the cost of the asset itself, but then there's the upkeep and maintenance, which is much lesser with your product. And then there's also the time saved in, repairing and, time spent at the fuel stations and all of that. So in a nutshell, roughly what's the net savings that we can look at?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because we have studied this and we've asked maybe 50 to 100 between the team, 50 to maybe 80 different riders of how many kilometers do you do a day? Because that's a starting point. So when we've been looking at the costs, we've calculated based on 100 kilometers a day. Now we don't know whether Some companies might say it's 160 kilometers we do, or 200 kilometers. We've calculated out the design of our bikes and the batteries and the motor and the performance and the range. But the financials, to give you the answer, is based on 100 kilometers a day. So if you're filling up the bike 3.5 times a week, then you times that by X amount of weeks. The bikes are on the road predominantly 7 days a week between different riders over different shifts. Then you start looking at the servicing, the oil changes, maintenance, SALIC, registration fees. All of that, you're looking at saving around 14,000 dirhams a year. We've calculated 14,700 dirhams a year just on 100 kilometers a day. So if it is fact and they're doing 160, then obviously that's saving a lot more than the 14,000. But when our bikes are only priced at 14,500.
So that's a net saving, yeah, after all
Absolutely.
like expenses.
So you've got the saving of 14,700, but then you've got the actual purchase price of the bike, which can range between 9,000 and 11,000 dirhams, plus then you've got the box and so on. With our bikes, you can brand them. With the traditional fuel or combustion engine bikes, you can't brand them because of the way they're designed. It looks like a bike with a box on the back. These are purpose-built bikes that can be branded and customized accordingly, and all the boxes are to meet RTA regulations and so on.
So the sky is the limit, really?
To some extent, absolutely, yeah.
No, it makes sense to have at this stage, given the rate at which the food delivery apps in particular are growing, and I don't see them stopping because it's just so damn convenient, isn't it? It's great that we have or we create a product purpose built for that, with of course the environment in mind, but also the driver safety and potential benefits for the companies in mind. So can you tell me a little bit about at what stage of development you are? I know you've got the approvals from the road traffic authorities to register these bikes, which is fantastic. Because these are electric bikes. This is not a straightforward new product. You're bringing in a new vehicle onto the road, so I presume that would have been quite a challenge, and I know it took you a little bit of time to get that done, but that's done now. So when do we start seeing these bikes on the road? How quickly do we kind of take over the market?
Yeah, the journey's been a long one. It's been incredible because I've gone into an industry as a novice, but as a passionate novice, wanting to learn everything from everyone. So that's sort of the premise. So it was a long journey. I've also been invited by the GSO to help write the legislation for electric vehicles in Saudi. So I'll be looking to make that trip over the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, which is an incredible accolade and an honour to be a part of that as well. So where we are now, we've got bikes arriving in about a month and a half's time. The bikes that we had here, I've got one personally that's at my house. The bikes that we had here, because of the certifications taking a while, we shipped them to the UK because we're selling the bikes in the UK as well. And so there was some delivery bikes, Biker and Electa, that went over there. So we'll get the next shipment in. And one thing that we're focused on is just being a little bit different and sustainability right across the board. So we want to have a carbon neutral or carbon minus footprint. And in order to do that, we're not having dealerships. We're not going to be investing the money in the real estate because then the costs go up. Our costs go up, they then get reflected to the customers. So we can create this affordable, eco-friendly, sustainable form of transport by keeping our costs low and passing that back on. My focus is taking away the inconvenience completely, whether it's insurance. We'll get that covered for you. If it's apparel, don't worry, we've got that sorted. So
it's all a package deal.
It's a complete package, and every part of it has been considered to some extent. So where we are, I would like to say that come November, some decisions will be made with the big prospect clients that we've spoken to. I would love for the government to endorse it and to really make that announcement, and eventually over time, hopefully with a little bit of lobbying from myself and partners and then the community, to really get behind this and make that change.
So a couple of months?
I'd say 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, okay, very exciting.
Very.
Now you're producing these in China. You've obviously designed them yourselves. Are you worried about the product just being copied and distributed in other markets?
Yeah, very good question. We have protected ourselves a lot. and the factory are producing the bikes for us exclusively. So one of the big parts of this is not just the bikes, but it's the data behind it, as I touched on earlier. And when you were also talking about the riders, you know, the accidents that they may have, with the app that's being built and the integration with the telco and telematics company, we're going to know how the rider is riding. Are they accelerating too fast? Are they braking too sharply? Are they swinging when they ride? Are they just riding too fast? Where are they on the roads? And we're going to be able to have all this data, which then we can feed back, work with the RTA to make sure that they understand as well.
And work with the insurance companies.
Of course, because also there was another point that we discussed when we met, is once you have these, you've got the alarm system. Okay, that's an element for the insurance companies to consider. Once we know how the riders are riding, and if we know that 500 need to go for testing or for refreshing courses, we can offer that. But we'll know that because of the data that we collect, and then we can say there's an advanced riding class that everyone has to go through. With the big food delivery companies and our other clients, we can then absorb that cost. We'll train the riders, and that's part of our CSR to make sure that everyone is as safe as they can.
And with this, everyone benefits. With lesser accidents, everybody wins. So it's an initiative worth focusing on quite closely. So one can't think about Tesla and not also think about autonomous vehicles. How does autonomy of riding fit into the context of bikes?
I believe that's a long way off. I don't believe that if you imagine a motorcycle and one of them being autonomous, you're just going to sit there and not ride it yourself. I can't see that happening. Having an autonomous vehicle that is a shell surrounding a motorcycle type frame or two-wheel, even three-wheel vehicle, yes, I can see that happening. I think we're a long way off, and I think that the vision of the inventors are just incredible to show what is out there. It's a bit like a fashion, like a catwalk. You see clothes on the catwalk, it's not that you're going to see people wearing these outrageous outfits, it's just showing what that designer can do. And I think that's the sort of transition, that stage we're in now. Yes, there's a whole platform, almost a blank canvas, to go and create your mark on the industry, with the autonomy, with the shared mobility, with there was a conference a little while ago that it was an alarming statistic that 90% of the time that you own a vehicle, it's static. It's in a garage or it's parked somewhere. You're not actually using it. So you're investing all of this money and time and dreams and to pay for this vehicle, whereas actually, in fact, 90% of the time it's just parked up. So do you need a car? And that's why you've got the likes of e-car, U-Drive, and I've been looking at others in Turkey, Lebanon, other parts of the world. It makes sense. It does make total sense to not have your own vehicle. But when you start then looking at the inner city commutes with London and the congestion charges and the low emission zones and just the taxes and charges in general, it makes sense to have your own transport. And if that is like an e-scooter, then great, you can get onto the train, depending on if you live in the suburbs, get onto the train and get off the train, you commute to work. But having your own transport to then avoid public transport, avoid the trains and buses and so on, we could end up with inner cities just being electric zones, which would then allow the platform for the autonomous vehicles to just be that little bit safer. And I think autonomous vehicles, when everyone's autonomous, they'll work absolutely beautifully. When you then start adding in human riding or driving ability or errors, then that's where we might face issues.
Sticking to Tesla, they recently announced, they recently went live with their car insurance product.
Yes.
The key reason behind this was because Teslas are notoriously difficult and expensive to repair.
Yes.
Is that going to be the case with ONE MOTO, or is this something that you can decentralize quite easily?
When I said we've considered everything, I'm glad that all the questions you're asking, I've got an answer because it has been considered. So what we've done with our parts, so one of the reasons I believe Tesla is the parts are very expensive, and because of the order quantity is not necessarily as in those high volumes. So yes, the repair side of a Tesla is why it's so expensive with insurance, and it's amazing that they're now offering that. But what we've got is the parts for a motorcycle are a lot cheaper to produce, and we use hardened materials that are recycled. So when you start looking at the parts, we've pre-purchased a bank of different parts. So that's the agreement that the factory have got with us and us with them, that we've got all these parts ready, pre-ordered, if you like. Because there's no maintenance servicing, the only things that are going to need to be changed are your brakes at 25,000 kilometers and your tires. Depending upon when you ride, it's going to be 10, 15,000 kilometers. So they're really only the two things. If riders have accidents or issues or scratches and want to replace a fairing, not a problem. That can be changed very inexpensively. So do they want that to go through insurance? It's up to them. But we've made it affordable, and it doesn't need to be expensive.
You basically wouldn't be surprised to see, any old workshop around town being able to repair these, or do you find that it has to be done, given their more electric nature, at your authorized workshop only?
If you've got someone who understands electrics, understands motors, and has a bit of experience in, say, fixing or repairing vehicles in general, it's not very difficult in order to do. So technically anyone could do it. With our bikes, there is an element of training that the workshops go through, and we've agreed a dealership agreement with Shivani from Desasia Motorcycles, and we've been friends and we've been in business for 8 or 9 years now. So when we were talking earlier about how you come to Dubai, and I was talking about the network and the relationships you build, this is one of those old relationships. So when we were coming up with ONE MOTO and we were looking for that dealership and that service centre and the after sales workshop, Desasia Motorcycles is the one that we've signed the agreement with.
So you've got UAE sorted, but presumably you've got to enter a lot of markets. At the same time, you're an exciting new startup. Are you going to take that land grab approach and try to be in as many markets as quickly as possible, or do you have a different view?
Yes, is the answer. With the way the business is built, whether it's the website, the media, the marketing, and everything that goes around it, we are going to be looking for franchise and distribution partners. We're going to be open to that. There will need to be a certain level of commitment, as there always is with franchise opportunities, to go into the rest of the GCC, MENA, as well as the APEC region. That's going to take a level of investment. And this is a really exciting part for me, because I've reached out to a few VCs, and it's a realm that I've never been involved with before. So I'm very, very excited. One, I want to learn. And you know yourself, when you're in business for a certain amount of years and it's you have your team around you, so you're nothing without them, but you don't always have those mentors, those people you can learn more and more from. And there's only so many books or podcasts that you can listen to and read. I'm really looking forward to learning that next stage in terms of investment and venture capital. So with that, we're going to be able to expand regionally, internationally a lot quicker, and that's the goal.
Do you expect to have the good problem of not being able to meet orders? Because again, that's a problem that Tesla has had. So do you have capacity limitations, and when could that become a problem for you?
We can produce and deliver between 3,000 and 10,000 bikes a month. So the factory we've got it's taken us a lot of time to get that factory and also get their commitments.
So what happens when you have a requirement to do 50,000 plus a month?
That would be a problem. That'd be a beautiful problem to have. When we start looking at the UAE and you don't have those, say 12,000 bikes on the road, because we are in that integration stage of electric vehicles, I can't see anyone totally eradicating and alleviating themselves of the burden of fuel motorcycles, because they work. Because without them, you don't have food delivery, and that's a big, big revenue stream. Even with the, I believe 20% of Kareem's business comes from ride sharing in India and Pakistan. So that's a huge market for them. Are they going to shift completely to electric vehicles? It'd be amazing if they do, but I believe it's going to be an integration process. So I can't see that we're going to have an order for 50,000 in 1 month. Again, it would be beautiful if it does happen, but my focus would rather, I would even advise, why don't we look at integrating 5,000 a month over 10 months, and then we can iron out any problems. We can make sure that customer focus is maintained at the level that I expect it to be for myself, and then we'll pass that on to the customers.
So you mentioned you're in touch with VCs. We have a couple of VCs perhaps watching at the moment. So do you want to tell us about what kind of investment you're raising, what your plans are, how much you've raised already?
Yeah, so everything that's been funded so far has been self-funded by a partner and myself, and who's in the UK, and he looks after the R&D and the sort of technical geeky side of things, and I'm on the design and marketing. It works well. So that's the way the team's structured. We also use the benefits and the features and the abilities of my other company's video ad brand, and then dot casting for the talent when we start creating those campaign material. When it looks at the financials, we're looking at $3 million for the initial investment as, say, round A, and then from that will then be, we've got quite a cohesive plan of what we're going to be doing with that. Before you start looking at the international global market, I work very much in a modular level of let's get something right now here, let's box that up and get that working. Once that operating smoothly, you've got a system. Once you've got a system, you can copy paste that system, make your adjustments for a certain market. So that modular level is where we are, and hopefully with a VC that has experience in distribution, transport, maybe the food delivery last mile sector as well, that'd be wonderful.
Moving to a little bit about what I know about you from a personal context. You got married last year and you have a baby due in October, so congratulations.
Thank you.
But you play music, you've had your songs played on the radio, you've done various gigs in the UAE, and you've played a gig for Mafia in the Thailand. I think that's a whole different episode.
A different story.
Maybe it's a feature film, not an interview. But you've tattooed people and you've performed music on the streets of Hong Kong, and you've done 64 skydives.
Yeah.
So, do you think about work-life balance? Presumably, with a startup like this, you have to be all in, and Elon Musk, again using that as a reference, is famous for being completely dedicated and working unbelievable hours a day. So, do you want to tell me about your views on work-life balance and how you approach it?
So when I started in business with Media Cubed, I did find myself putting in those 16, 18 hours a day, and I was just working very hard, being very, very busy, but almost being a busy fool. And you can only look at yourself and sort of retrospectively see what you were doing. Was I being effective with my time? Was I being efficient with my time? Or was I just making myself busy? And although you wouldn't admit it back then, yeah, there was an element of that, very much so. And because of your energy and your approach, as an entrepreneur or as a business person, you find that you absorb other people that also want to take up your time. So you can be very, very busy, which then creates an element of ineffectiveness. And when I suppose about 4 years ago, I set up a company called Travel World, and it's very much a sharing experiences through video dedicated to travel, tourism, hospitality. So that's a it's not a side project, it's a sustained business which is separate from Media Cubed. But then I don't have much time because I'm focused on various different things. The beauty is I have a wonderful team around me in order to help and support and encourage, and you can lead them as much as you possibly can. As you know yourself, you need them to take ownership, and you can't employ someone to care about your brand or your business as much as you do, and that's a big learning curve, understanding that no one cares as much as you do. That was a big help.
Doesn't that scare you then, that especially because you're in branding and marketing, aren't you a little bit of a perfectionist, and assuming that no one will care as much as you do, because they don't own the business like you do. Does that worry you, or have you been comfortable with letting go and not being a perfectionist?
It's been a long journey to be able to let go and trust. When you start trusting and get let down, it hurts, and it still hurts after all these years, and it still happens after all these years. So there's an element of learning. When you said, am I comfortable to let go and not be a perfectionist? No. Everything has to be done a certain way. So the way that we work in sort of production, creative talent with Media Cubed, I do oversee everything that goes out. If something goes out without my approval and it comes back, then I need to step in, understand why that happened. Again, it's just about creating a system which does free up a lot of time. But in terms of perfection, if you constantly strive, whether it's app development, whether it's product development, if you constantly strive for that level of perfection, you'll never launch anything. So there is an element of, you just need to push play, just go for it.
Adam, that was great. Thank you very much. Really excited about ONE MOTO and seeing where you go, and I'm sure soon enough you'll be taking over the world. So all the best.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.